Today we will be taking the topic fund management and finance operation. And how we want the process to go is that we will first touch upon the need of funding and what are the various sources through which you can raise funds. How we go about the proposal process, although there was a mention of touching upon tendering, since we don't really do tendering at NSRCEL, it wouldn't be right for us to talk about it. And from the proposals, we will talk about the various project activities that start the moment we receive funds, how we go through the entire process. And Pranay will touch upon the compliance aspect of how do we track our expenses, how do we make sure that we keep our accounting books clean, and what are the kind of reports that report requests that we get from our management team or from other stakeholders. So these are things that he will cover as part of financial management. Now, I mean, generally, when it comes to fund management, we can think about top three buckets, which is, our incubators operational expense. In case, we are slightly ahead of the journey as an incubator, then we want to do capacity building at our incubator. And finally, funding our startups. So these are the three broad categories under which we require funding. And there are various ways to get these kind of funds made available. Like we know that for operational expenses, generally there are government agency bodies who give us funds, and similarly there are corporate sponsors. And also as part of capacity building, like Mighty or AIM Catalyst are people who have seen provide funding for capacity building of the incubator itself. When it comes to funding for startups, actually the right person to talk about how we even look at funding for startups would be Vikyath, who primarily manages our incubation. So Vikyath, if you can just share a little light upon how do we even source the right kind of investors for our startup, and what kind of funding is required, or what kind of how do we actually do the pass-through kind of funding for startups? I think that would be a kind of different perspective for them. Yeah.
Thanks, Aarathi. And to everyone here, even if you have a particular experience, it'll be great if you could also share, because one of the things is also to collectively learn and grow forward. We are not experts in this, but we do what we can. So, but just to share on the whole funding piece, we have several places that we try and work on to help impact more startups. So one of our main objective is to see how in terms of funding raised or working with certain organizations, how can we maybe impact more startups that come into our programs. So in terms of funding, right now we have a couple of verticals. One is we work with a lot of CSR organizations that kind of work with us in terms of churning out unique programs that have never been done before, and or it has that needs a lot more scale, right? So that is one part. And the next part is also on the terms of working with certain organizations in strategic alliances. So I've seen a lot of other organizations like, T-Hub and various other, incubators doing really well in this space. So our learnings also were from these kind of incubators. So we started to have strategic alliances with certain companies from the innovation team side, to kind of build an incubation kind of pipeline for those organizations. So we strategically work with companies like Maruti Suzuki and Infineon and various other companies to kind of build an innovation kind of a launchpad program where it could feed into their kind of their accelerators. So that is one part. And also the last part being, yes, we do apply for various government fundings and government, schemes to kind of grow our entire incubation effort. So also another thing is that one of the things that we actively do, and which I was just doing just an hour and a half ago, was trying to build a concept note for new kind of programs, wherein we went and we kind of reach out to various CSR organizations to see if it aligns to what they are doing, and we kind of pitch an idea to them. So here I would like to share a little more on the fintech program that we've done with with an organization to kind of show them how we are going to be impacting fintech companies, and kind of build a program. And when we build a program, it's kind of a platform. So now for us to scale that platform to impact 100 companies, it's quite doable. It's not moonshot for us. So we started to go and talk to various other financial institutions and various other CSR organizations to kind of grow that entire piece for nurturing fintech companies in Bangalore and in Bangalore. So that is what we do there. And also, if you have any questions, feel free to ask, because I don't want it to be a monologue. So if you could maybe unmute yourself, also go ahead, if that's okay with Nirupa and team. That is. So, and also another piece would be maybe on the whole corporate strategy part of it. So various organizations, various companies right now are opening their own accelerators, right? And one of the biggest challenges that they face now is growing their entire pipeline. So luckily for us, because we've done various themes and kind of have engaged with a lot of entrepreneurs over the years, we started to kind of bucket these companies into either, say, it's mobility or fintech or agri-tech or healthcare, and kind of bring in strategic partnerships with larger companies to kind of have a collaboration together to support them, and maybe they could open a sandbox, and maybe they could do active some kind of investment, and also kind of be that fishing pond for these larger companies to kind of look at innovative startups. And that is where I would also say that needs a lot of governance, because we do not want them to go to these large companies, and wherein there is ultimately a large company will try to swallow the small one, right? So we try to play the middleman kind of a ground, wherein, or that person who can govern these relationships and kind of help the startup to navigate these conversations. And if there's any kind of collaboration, the startup would definitely reach out to us and ask for our opinion. So that is various kind of maybe funding avenues, but I've seen various others do hackathons, do multiple, but which we haven't entered into, because we strategically took a call on events and competitions and hackathons, because we felt like we want to do a lot more on the long-term relationships and long-term partnerships. But I would say that that is also a good avenue to kind of raise money and go forward. So if there's any questions, feel free. Or Aarathi, if I haven't covered any piece, maybe you could help me. Yeah.
So Vikyath, I think we should also talk a little about that IICDC initiative, where we come in at the later stage to nurture the startups and then again send them back to the ecosystem.
Yeah, so there are a couple of initiatives that we've done for the past 2-3 years. That is also working with large organizations, like what Aarathi said. It's with Texas Instruments, where we kind of all the final year students kind of come into our program. We nurture them in terms of the business modeling and business side of things, and they also get technical mentorship from from Texas Instruments and various academic institutions. And that's where we started to also bring in these students, work with them, and there's a fork, right? Either they'll go on to continue their venture, wherein they could partner with another company and raise some money, or we would actively go and kind of help them do road shows. And also another part would be maybe they would churn out and join an organization. So we actively kind of are trying to do more in this line. So we are doing that with the Women Entrepreneurship Program, also with the Department in Science and Technology and Goldman Sachs. So that is what we are doing. So Aarathi, any other piece that maybe I didn't cover? Yeah.
No, I think we have covered most of the components that we are looking at from NSRCEL point of view. I think if we can just go to the various sources. Vikyath has already covered what are the various sources through which we get support to do these activities. One is the government grants, and the second thing is the corporate partnerships. I think the points that we would also like to touch upon is for the startups who are currently incubated at NSRCEL, there's also an equity or a per seat model that we have, where we get some kind of funds that come back to the to NSRCEL. But we are also looking at providing plug and play content for early stage incubators, where your pre-incubation can be taken care of by using this online modules that we have created, and it can be blended well with a live interactive session from your end. So the content comes from us, but how you want to blend it would purely be based on your requirements and whatever is your core incubator values and so on. So moving on, I think this is just a reiteration of the same thing. But in our case, what happened was we already had corpus that we received at the initial stage of starting our incubation center. And we use this for our basic incubator operation. And even now, the interest accrued from that is what we use to run some of the operational activity at NSRCEL. And as and when we require, we receive external funds, we use that to run our programs. We sort of touched upon the funding process itself and what happens in terms of, going with a concept note to a potential corporate partner or anybody who's like-minded in terms of partnership. So we go with a concept note, we tell them what are our strengths and what is it that we can provide, and basis that we submit a proposal. Most of the time we identify an opportunity, and based on that opportunity the proposal is created, and that's why we don't have a standard template as such that we use. So it is purely based on the ask from the other party and the kind of startups we currently have in our ecosystem. Then I slowly switched to the fund management itself, because once we submit a proposal at through NSRCEL, and if the proposal goes through, we receive this fund. And Pranay will talk a little more about how we actually start using this fund right from the beginning. We start mapping it to a project code to make sure that we track the budget properly and the expenses properly. And then we also start to do the program activities. So the program manager uses the initial tranche to start the outreach activities and do the program design when the moment we get some funds. Once we go past that stage where the program is just launched and we know that we have done our initial reviews with our startups, we start moving to the next aspect, which is to manage their milestones and to start giving them funds based on the program type. We give funds to these startups when they achieve certain milestone, and that's what we start tracking at this stage. And when we are at the end, or if it's a corporate money, there is a requirement for us to regularly share our spend and so on. So that is something that we do. So Pranay will actually touch upon this a little more in detail as to how much, to what in depth we have to do, because there are internal audits, there are external audits, depending on where the money is coming from. And that is something that we can look at. I think I will touch up this a little later, because how do we even look at milestone and then release funds based on the kind of milestone the startup has achieved? This is something we can look at the very end. I will allow Pranay to cover about certain aspects of accounting, and then we can come back to this.
Hi everyone. So when it coming to the accounting perspective, the first and the most thing will start once as soon as the proposal is submitted, we receive back our funds in our accounts. And the basic thing which we should be noting down when we submit for the proposal is the type of complaints which the partner wants us to comply, and the timeline which is fixed upon. Like most of the government projects will ask for the timeline year ends, whereas some of these private partners, they ask for quarterly or semi-annual reports. And also in terms of the tracking of the expenses, okay, there are two types of expenses. One is like program specific, which are very specific to the program, and or the expenses which are general. So the program specific expenses are completely or should be completely covered by the program, like we say women startup program or agri-tech related startups or fintech thing. Whereas there will always be some general or the shared expenses, we can call it as, which will be shared by most of the programs. So these sort of shared expenses is where most of incubators will be running, like have to be spending out of their pockets. To avoid these sort of things, generally in all the proposals, we will add in a component called as overhead component, where we'll be using it for our general expenses. And in the same thing, like depending on the type of fundings, basically fundings for the incubator might be CSR funding, or if they have both 12A as well as ATG, it should be like even they can receive income tax donations. And there are some earmarked funds which will be raised by the incubator, which will be used for the long-term perspective. Like in the earlier where Aarathi shared that it is called as a corpus thing. Okay. And with each of these different types of funding received, the targets might be different, spending targets. Some are spread across, like with the new CSR policies coming up from 1st of the April 2021, where every organization which receives CSR funds have to give an impact report, which is mandate for all of the incubators or which of the organizations receiving CSR funds. Then I'll come to the budgeting part. So once we have submitted our proposal and it is agreed upon mutually, we'll be looking at the budget part. So the budget has to be tracked based on the proposal which is submitted to our partner. And also we at NSRCEL track it every quarterly. Depending on the size of the incubation center, it should be decided when to track so that you get proper time on the spending. Okay. And there might be different budget heads. Like for example, one of the major,
Sorry,
I mean most
the slides moving, please.
No, I'm speaking in the same slide itself. So first one we spoke about accounting. I'm speaking about budgeting. So when it comes to budgeting part, so we will have different accounting heads. So one of the most accounting head is administration part for the program. So such or you can have seed funding in the budget, administration, or for running of the program, like indirect support to the incubators. So these are expenses, and all whenever we are spending itself, it has to be bucketed under the proper budget. So when it is accounted under the proper budget, it will ease us when it comes to the auditing perspective, as well as when we are submitting our reports to our partners. And also we will come to know the balances under each budget. For example, whenever you are making a payment relating to any of these expenses, we can just make like budget head, budget allowed budget available in that head and amount which is being used now. It will help us to track the budget on time and spending. It will help us to track the spendings properly. Then so data reports. So these data reports or MIS reports, which is called as management information reports. So this depends on the type of the program. For example, if there is any program which is giving seed fundings, so they just wanted to give on an annual basis how much amount is spent or transferred to the startups, as well as is there any repayment received from them. And like depending on the partner, they might even wanted to know the sectorial differences where the funding has been mostly used. And nowadays, most of these partners wanted to fund to the tech related startups. Then to the compliance part, the major issue which which at NSRCEL or IIMB we are facing is about the application of GST thing. So when it comes to the GST and income tax are both being different acts, there is no common ground. So if someone donates under income tax, GST doesn't exempt it. Whereas some of the incubation, it depends on the perspective of the incubation center. So that is causing us most of the issues which can't be come under GST perspective and which can't be considered under GST perspective. And then when it comes to the overhead part, which we spoke earlier, that which will be used for the general or the shared expenses. So we take care that most of the programs which are coming up at NSRCEL will be, we will at least take some percentage out of that total fund as an overhead, and we'll be tracking it on for the general expenses itself. So when it comes to the internal audit perspective, it's most beneficial to have an internal audit because looking at the various programs, depending on the various program and depending on each program's timeline is different, and also the type of report to be given to each partner is different. This internal audit thing will help us to cover up any gaps between the accounting and also the compliance parts. And
Prana, if I may just quickly interrupt you. For the program like the Women Startup program that we have, the when fund is allocated, when we provide fund to these women after achieving certain milestone, they have to submit invoice, right? Can you just cover upon that process?
Yeah, I'm coming to that.
Sure.
So in these in some of the programs, we are reimbursing some of the expenses to the incubators. Like as of now, we are reimbursing the outreach expenses for most of the incubators. Like amount is fixed for under the program. Like each incubator will be allowed to the maximum of 1 lakh, and it's a reimbursement sort of thing. Since it's a reimbursement sort of thing, they have to provide us with the proper documents like invoices where they have spent on the amount, and the similar amount will be paid back to them. Okay, and these details have recently have come up in the audit queries, like what basis do we track these expenses. So these sort of justification things, like not every incubator will have the fixed amount. So this sort of a reimbursement thing have been done by like 2 to 3 of our programs at NSRCEL. And then and when coming to the seed funding issues, so the major thing we have faced at NSRCEL is the agreements with the incubators. So in these agreements, we anytime as an incubator wanted to have some common agreements which has to be shared across most of these seed funding things. So we put an objection clause such like these loans which we are giving it to the incubators as a seed funding, if they are doing good, we instead of asking them to pay back our amount, we would like to convert it into stake, which will help us to increase our capital in that company and also get higher returns, because we will not be able to get returns from most of these startups. And then when it one second. So then in data reports also, every year under this CSR impact report, it has to be given to the partner which is funded as the CSR money. And they will be responsible, I mean, from there, and also they have to track the expenses. So it should be beneficial to note which sort of expenses are directly impacting the incubators and what are all the expenses used for the general running of the program, as well as what is used as an overhead part of the program expense. I think I would like to take up any of these issues faced by the other incubators. Like we have mostly faced this GST related issue with all the CSR funds we receive at IIMB, because IIMB wanted to be more conservative. It charges GST on most of the CSR grants. I think that should be from my end. And if there is any other issues which you have also just will be ready to learn from it.
So Pranay, I remember for some of the funding you had said that GST may not be applicable. Can you cover those two in scenarios where the CSR funding that comes, when it's when we apply GST and when do we not apply GST?
Yeah. So like I said earlier, in income tax, donation is considered to be completely exempt. In GST, it is not clear whether the CSR donations are completely out of GST purview or not, because they have just defined the charitable activities on which GST won't be applicable. So there are two sort of fundings, like when it comes to donations, where the purpose is not mentioned by the donee. In such sort of things, generally GST won't be applicable, is what the opinion we have received from our legal representatives. And when they're giving it as a CSR expenditure from their own bucket, in such a scenarios, IIMA has taken stand to charge them because that is not specifically exempted or covered as a donation. So in these two scenarios, one is where GST is charged and other is not chargeable to GST. And the other problem from the partner's perspective is when they show it, if GST is covered, should they cover GST also as an CSR expenditure or not? So a few of them objected, saying that GST, if for example, if they say they are donating 10 crores to you, they have to pay 18% on that, which will make 1.8 crore. So this 1.8 crore is a question to that. So if they say the total CSR expenditure is only 10 crores, they have to bear extra 1.8 thing. So in this perspective, where one of our partners said these 1.8 crore can be claimed by them as an input sort from the GST law, which will as a net show that expenditure would be only to the extent of 10 crores. I think,
yeah. So we did throw a lot of, I mean, see, these are personal issues that we faced, and what we have done to resolve these issues from our side when it comes to accounting, taxation, and compliance. But we would really be happy to hear from the other incubators as to what are the challenges or what kind of reports or internal audit systems you have, because that is a collective learning that everybody else would also benefit. Any best practices that you have which has helped you, please share. Please feel free to share it here. Pranay, can you just touch upon the kind of reports that we have to create for various stakeholders? Like, for example, if you're sharing the reports for internal team, the internal management team, what is the kind of reports they ask? And if we are sharing it with our sponsor and even the government agencies, what are the kind of reports they ask?
So reporting, like Aarthi said, we have two sort of reportings basically. One is to the partner, which they expect reporting to be in the same format where we would have submitted them the proposal. In the proposal, we would have submitted the budget format. So basically, that would be easy for them to track on the things. So for partners' perspective, they wanted to, we'll be just preparing the report on the same basis on which we have submitted a proposal to them. And from the internal perspective, where we are deciding how much funds is left and how much is being utilized, even this we will be looking at on depending on the funds where we have the discretion to spend on our own and where it is specifically fixed. Like example, I say if they say seed funding specifically has to go to the venture, whereas if you say indirect support to the incubator, that can be covered up to provide incubator with the excess support, not specifically earmarked. So for internally, we look into these sort of things which is discretionary into the incubation center, and which can be spent for more benefits of the incubator, which is not limited. And from the partners perspective, we just go through this. And from the partners also, we have these two things, like one is the government fundings and other is the private fundings. So in respect to the government funding, there have been more stress from the governments where they follow their own format and which is approved by the controller and auditor general. So we have to be uploading the same format in the government website. Like we have been using for all the government funding, PFMS is a must thing. So we just upload it over there, the funding and utilization certificates. Most of the partners ask us through at the year end. We have been issuing it quarterly for our own internal thing to make it easy. So at the year end, we'll not be rushing out and spending the funds. And the deadline which has been fixed is the thing which we have to be discussed now. I think because of this COVID thing, some of our funds couldn't be expensed on the time. But for all such an extension of things, basically from the audit perspective, we have been asked to get these extension approvals from the partner itself, whether it is a government perspective or from private partners.
Yeah. Thanks, Pranay.
But if anyone's here who has any particular question or challenge that you're currently facing, maybe over the years you would have faced it. Maybe if you want to unmute and ask us, feel free. Or maybe there is someone else. There will be someone else who will solve that here. So yeah, if there's any questions, feel free. I guess not. Yeah.
Either the content was too heavy that's it's taking time to understand, and probably when you have when you face those kind of situations, maybe you will be able to go back to this video and have a quick, you can listen to it, because some of these aspects still you actually face these challenges. It's very difficult to understand why Pranay is insisting, and we have learned the hard way, and that's exactly why Pranay is talking a lot about the kind of time that we have spent during these internal and external audits. This time, I think none of those issues were faced, because right from the time the fund was dispersed to till now, it was tracked in a particular way. So they did not get any such issues when the audit happened this time. So yeah, I mean, even if you feel that you have questions, but right now you probably are not able to bring it up, you can write to us and we would be happy to share our thoughts on this.
I have one doubt. This is Vishnu.
Yeah, please.
With respect to the structuring of the entity level, especially for the incubations, whether if you see the sources of funds for the incubation centers, either it will be CSR funds or else from the government grants most of the time. Whether the incubation can be a for-profit organization or non-profit organization. So that is one conflict what we have. I mean, this is a confusion or how to set up an organization. That is one part. Another thing is, if it's a for-profit, what will be the nature of the income for the incubation center? Like, how can you take the equity in the incubators, like startups? So these are the two questions what I have. So, yeah. So in terms of this organization structure, whether it's profit or non-profit, what will be the value addition to the shareholders at the end of the day? If as a finance guys, we may see the persons who are started this company, whether their net worth is increasing or else is that a social cost to the ecosystem?
So I think I'll just loop in, and so these incubation centers, whether it has to be profit or non-profit, is at the discretion of the board, which has come up with the incubation center. For example, most of these incubation centers which are tied up to the educational institutions or non-profit things. And when it comes to the private there are some private incubation center, like we can see the Amazon incubation center is also come up. These are all the private partners where they do it for profit. And since we were in non-profit thing, we will have more restrictions on making income from the funds or the grants received for spending towards the startup. And for the profit related incubators, the major source of income is an incubation fees. One thing, like in one of the slides where Aarathi has shown, incubation center is incubation fees, like per seat we collect per month some amount from the incubators. And the second sort of income is a stake from the incubator. And when it comes to the stake, the major issue with the new ventures which are coming up is they don't want to give up the stake because their ownership will be diluted. And for everything they have to, I mean, for the any major decision which company has to take up, they have to come back to you, and that takes some significant amount of time, impacting their timeline. So to just wrap up, I mean, it to decide whether it's for profit or not profit, it solely depends on the incubation. I mean, the sort of player you want to be over a period of time. I think Vikyath, if I miss anything, or Aarathi, if I miss anything.
I need Vishnu. Is yours a non-profit incubator or a for-profit incubator?
It's a kind. See, we want to start the incubation services now. Okay. So still we are in the initial stage. Just we are figuring out whether it should be a non-profit or a for-profit organization.
Okay, I think you can take a look at.
See, definitely I'm not in for non-profit organization, but the way when we discuss about when I discuss about the grants and all those things, always it when I take the government funds, I have to utilize it for the cause.
Yes.
But as a management team, as a shareholder, I won't be getting anything.
No, got
So,
it. If you're holding, that is if you're holding shares in the company, right? So I think you can have two initiatives. One part is you can always do a non-profit kind of incubation program where maybe if your institution gets non-profit money, CSR money, you can always do a program through that. And if it is a privately held incubation center where you want to take stock in a company and maybe you want to create a small corpus where you want to invest in companies, well, that is a different beast altogether. So I think in terms of, but there has to be strict guidelines in trying to build these hybrid models, because you can't, as a nonprofit, you can't also maybe at times hold stock in a company, but may want to kind of have another entity that holds this kind of corpuses. Yeah.
Yes, I'm in line with your thought process. Even I was exploring that, I got the exact answer what I need.
Yeah, maybe you want to do a Section 8 company and then do something else also. Yeah.
That is one thing. And also with regard to the shareholder incubation, how startups are will be willing to give the holding to the incubation centers.
Yeah. So
whether will they
yeah, I think there are quite a few incubation centers here, but I will have to disclaim, I have to say that I have a few biases. So when I came into NSRCEL, we used to we used to take 5% in each company. And now we give two options. That is either they pay per seat and incubation services, or if in case it comes from a program that has been sponsored, we don't really take a stake in the company, but also we do some advisory kind of stake in case someone wants us on their cap table. But one thing I've noticed is that it's a double-edged sword, wherein there are some very quality startups who do not want to give shares in their company, but there are some of them who want an institution and basically have some skin in the game, right? Like the institution should have some skin in the game. But one only question I'll have to ask in all of that is, if we hold stock in shares in any of these companies, when are you going to actually exit? Like, is it going to be in 3 years? Is it going to be in 5 years? Or are you going to say when they become $1 billion company, or things like that, which I don't see any ROI in, but as you keep maybe developing a good incubation model, I think the quality of startups improve, and then you can always start off by saying that we take 1 or 2% in as advisory shares, or you would put maybe money and put a safe note there and say that you would exit when they raise money or pay back, or they would pay back that money. So I think here are a few thoughts there, but when it came down to NSRCEL, we are saying that it's founder friendly and founder first. So we give the option to the venture as to if they want to give us a small share in their company that as part of incubation, or they want to pay a fee if they can't really afford giving shares in the company. Yeah, if other thoughts are there with other incubators, feel free to share what your model is also. Yeah.
Thank you. I got the clarity.
Yeah, I guess there's no other question. Maybe Aarathi and Prany, you could take over.
Sure. No, I think to sum it up, and also to just touch upon this piece, of releasing funds based on the milestone that the startup has achieved. I just want to quickly talk a little about it and how we are using effective incubation management tool to handle this whole thing, where the process is very seamless, and whatever reports that Prany was talking about, it's very easy to download and share it with the various stakeholders, or even give them access so they can directly track the progress in the tool itself. So as mentioned earlier, we had said that when startups need to be given funds, they will only be given funds in tranches unless they haven't achieved a particular milestone. We generally never give them the tranche for the next set. So we have two scenarios, and I will ask Pranay to touch upon that. There is a women-centric program which is running where the money was given to them even during the pre-incubation phase. And pre-incubation, generally we don't give funds, but here it was given against an invoice, and it was managed in a particular way. And I will also ask Pranay to talk about IICDC, where the funds were released in another way. So depending on the maturity level of the startup who comes in and the kind of program we have, there are ways that we ask the startups to fill in their milestone. So each one goes through a OKR activity, and after that they are asked to identify 2 to 3 main milestones which they need to achieve within a quarter. And under each milestone, we also have 3 sub-milestones. And we do a review once a month just to be sure that they are on track. Like I said, depending upon the maturity of the startup, sometimes it is done by the program manager, where we know that the startups will stick to their milestones because it's more important for them than us. We just end up doing it. But in case where we have students involved, and this is primarily for something like IICDC, we have mentors who sit with them every week and help them work towards that milestone. So 2 different approaches, but the idea is to make sure that they complete the milestone so they can get the next set of funds available. I'm just sharing a snippet of one of the milestones that was created by a startup. So here, if you look at it, she wanted.
Just one piece.
Yeah, Vikyath, go ahead.
So just a disclaimer here to everyone, it's not like we believe in tranching. Tranching in terms of VC funding is very different, because we don't believe VC funds should do that. But what we mean by tranching is just to kind of help support, and also the venture would tell us that they need help somewhere, and not really tell them, hey, you know what, go and get this and then come and we'll give you money. We are trying to actively work with them to kind of reach that goal, because it helps us kind of help a venture. Otherwise, what value are we adding to the venture is the big question. So just wanted to say that out loud. When we say tranching, it's not that like how the VCs do tranching. That is very different to what an incubator should do.
Yeah. So our idea is to make sure that the startup is successful, and whatever little push or support that we need to provide in the process, that's exactly what we are trying to do with this particular format. So I'm just this snippet here is where the startup has actually said that there is a budget allocated for 45,000. And they've utilized currently 38,500. And she's very clearly said where the money is spent and under what big bucket head does it fall under. So all this is again easily tracked by us, because it's all on a tool. At any given point of time, if we need to see the overall progress of the cohort also, the system allows us to do that. So while I'm not saying that you need to always have a system, the idea of having a system is to make the internal processes much more smooth, and it's more easy to manage the paperwork that comes after. So I think I would stop with this. So any questions that you want to, rather than questions, I would say anything that you think we need to touch upon, or if you want us to cover more, we could take it up, or we could have a follow-up if you felt some additional information is required, and so on. It's up to you how you want to take it up.
I think accounts being most dry thing. No one.
Yeah, I mean, like, we found it so difficult to even look at a session for this, because I think all 3 of us agree. Pranay has no choice. He's an accounting person. So we generally tap into him and say, Pranay, help us understand this whole piece. But yeah, feel free.
Hello, Aarthi.
Yeah, please.
Can you hear me? Yeah. This is Mahesh from Kerala. We would like to know how you frame out for exit policy. Like you mentioned that milestone, if incubator doesn't perform and according to the milestone, and how you will take up the action. What are the steps that you will?
Sure. I will start a little and then I know Vikyath can add because he's used to this a lot more. So generally when startups do not achieve a milestone which they have put in a system of sort, the first thing that we do is we try to identify why they couldn't do. A mentor actually spends quite some time in understanding what are the challenges that the startup is facing. Whether this is something that can be fixed with a little more guidance from his side. If we feel that that's possible, then definitely we pitch in and we support and we try to make sure that they get there. Or if this is challenges because of external situations, like most of them couldn't achieve their milestone because of the COVID situation. Last quarter, one of our program, we literally had to delay that the milestone review part because most of the startups, either the founder itself was infected by COVID or some of their family member, and they couldn't obviously focus on their business. So in that case, collectively we took a stand that for this particular quarter we should probably not look at their milestone because that didn't make sense for us. So collectively we have certain thoughts. If the individual has the right attitude, then there is a different approach. Then as a incubator, I think Vikyath will be the right person to share.
I don't know if I'm the right person, but I can tell you today in the morning itself, we had a conversation with one of the companies. The thing is that we are not trying to say that if you touch this goal only, then we'll give you money. We've also taken chances by trying and understanding and having a conversation with the founders. There was a company, and especially in this pandemic time, many of them went to zero in terms of revenue, and we had to give them money also, but we can't really the situation was as such that do they go and basically shut shop or do we support them? So since we are an incubator, we should be supporting them, right? We should incubate them. So one of the things was the company was looking for some money, and we went ahead and gave around 15 or 20 lakhs at that time, and they could grow. And currently, after exactly 6 months after, they raised, not 6 months, 4 months after, they happened to raise $2.5 million and give us back that money. So when we talk about a milestone based thing, I think there is a lot of people, we always try to put some metrics saying that if they match these metrics, yes or no, but I think we need to have a little bit of that human touch to kind of take a chance on some of the founders. So I wouldn't say that unless there is some illegal activity, we should not really, we should support them and encourage and to see what is the reason for not hitting a milestone. As long as we know that reason, I think we are fine. I hope that answered. Otherwise, I'm sorry.
So I have a quick question. My name is Carl. Can I ask a question on that note?
Please go ahead, Carl.
Yes, please.
See, I mean, I liked what Vic had said in terms of having a human touch. So I'm all for that. I think founder first is something which I strongly believe in as well. That being said, there have been occasions where I've heard from other incubators that startups come there for the funding, and once the incubator gives some funding, the startup is nowhere to be seen, right? So they don't really listen to the incubator, so to speak. See, my experience on that has been mixed. I mean, so I can't necessarily take sides because I've seen both sides. But other experiences that I've seen, at least in Hyderabad, at least from an academic point of view, academic organizations supporting outside incubators, outside startups rather. They come there for funding, and at the end of the funding, they are not to be seen. I mean, which is grants I'm talking about, not about investment. So at least from incubator point of view, they look at funding as a way to control the startups. I'm not sure that is the right way, but I just wanted to kind of get your thoughts on these aspects.
I think I can speak for 1 hour on this, but what you said is actually spot on in terms of giving someone money and maybe them not coming back later. But I would maybe ask the other question as to, they may not be coming back to us maybe because they don't see value, right? So what we started to do was trying to figure out, are we adding value anywhere in terms of either connections to other VCs? Because once you give them money, many of our startups come back for follow-on or to connect to other VCs or work on their pitch decks. We help them with their valuation reports and so on. So they know that there's a lot more to lose than than just the money part of it. And we've also had if a venture will always come just because the carrot happens to be the money part of it. But once we started to kind of connect them to the right kind of mentors, have a program that really helps them, and not just doing sessions for the sake of doing sessions, wherein we've also had sessions wherein we tell people, if you don't find value, you can leave the call. It's okay, because it gives us enough of feedback to say that, maybe it didn't help them. So that's where I think we may need to start operating from. So currently for us, a lot of learning in terms of, are we adding value to these ventures? And many of the ventures that we give money to come back to us to say that, can you help? Can they get help in terms of follow-on funding, connections to other VCs, in terms of valuation reports, if we have some connections, or also maybe take them through a boot camp for accelerating their growth. So that is how we've kind of tackled it in a way. Hopefully that helped.
Sure, thanks for sharing that. I know this is a little different question, but if I can just ask one more question, how do you measure your success? I mean, I know it's out of time as well. Because some people look at success in terms of raising funds. I'm not all for that. Some people look in terms of getting startup to be cash positive, revenue positive rather. So I just want to, because this is a little similar, but though it's not necessarily in line with the topic of discussion.
No, great question. Actually, that was the first thing I asked when I joined NSRCEL. So one of the things is that we are okay if people, so our Launchpad has a very different success metric. Our incubation has a very successful, a different metric. In terms of, we don't say that raising money is successful, but we've had companies that went after Launchpad, shutting down that business and going and starting another business also. So one big example of that, because this is recorded, I should not explain it, but we've had, companies like Auto Ninja, companies like Nestaway and things like that, who came in with one business and they did not work out. They went and started these other companies. So if we are incubating the person and not really the venture at times, right? So it's okay if they continue with that journey, it is a success metric. If they do not, if they want to shut shop and go on and move on, that is also a sense of giving them more clarity to kind of help them grow. We've also had ventures that come back after 6 to 8 months. With some measurable outcome, which we kind of give them, saying that get to this stage and we can incubate you. And that is kind of how we would maybe measure it. And another thing is that we are just trying to say, have they built clarity in terms of what they want to do for the next 3 to 6 months? Either they are going to do rapid sales, or they're going to do some fundraising, or they can sustain by themselves. We have many bootstrap companies. A majority of them are actually bootstrapped, and we kind of encourage that, because the value side of things really helps. So I would say that we don't have a very one success metric. We have multiple kind of success metrics. And also there have been times where things don't work out for a venture, but they go on and enter the workforce, but they do come back later on in future. So we think that we are hopeful that maybe they want to start up again at better times.
Got it. Thank you.
Any final questions before we wind up the session?
Yeah, in line to what the conversation was just going on. Am I audible?
Yes, you are.
Yeah. So I was asked this question in my interview as well when I applied for the position of incubation manager. My interviewer, they asked me that what do you where do you see the incubator 6 months down the line, 1 year down the line? So I said we'll be hopefully having, God willing, we'll be having X number of successful startups. So they asked me, like, what is your idea of a successful startup? So I took a moment and then I said, like the startup getting their first customers. Like, I've been a startup and I know for me, getting my first customer and solving the problem which I was trying to solve was what felt fulfilling and what felt like I succeeded in what I was doing. So that is a metrics which made me feel successful, and that is how I would like to assess the startups that are coming to our incubator. That is the metrics I would use to assess their success. So what are your thoughts on that? May I know?
No, I think that's a interesting thought process. Actually, one of the things is you said it already, so I think I can just try and amplify that by saying that one of the biggest parts happen to be what are we doing to kind of help a particular startup grow. And whether we've been in, we've actually made cold calls for our companies, also acting like we are their kind of employees. We've actually gone on the on the streets to kind of not, I wouldn't say street, not to make it dramatic, but we've
I get
also
that.
gone on sales calls with companies and closed a very good deal that really helped them. So our whole point is that what are we doing that is founder friendly? And one thing that we always tell in our intro call when we bring in startups is saying that we are also part of your co-founding team. So that really helps at times.
Mm-hmm.
I think, and with the connections and with other incubators here, you can always reach out to people and kind of get whatever support someone needs. And they will go back and actually they'll get us. Now, tomorrow I'm giving a session in some group that is actually has amazing startups that because one person referred us, he said, hey, you should go to NSRCEL and talk to them for incubating your venture. They are kind of bringing in more people to us, and we don't really bank on any kind of outreach or something like that. So as long as the feedback loop is there, we are happy to kind of grow that. And we've written emails also for startups where they had to talk to some customer and we edited it and things like that. So I think it's all about
Proofreading types.
And it's the small things that help.
Yeah. So like, would you or would anyone here, all the incubators that are present here in the meet, like, would you consider the two metrics that I mentioned, like first one being them being the startups getting their first customers, and second, them solving the problem they tried to solve with the product or service? Those two things, would you be inclined to use that as a metrics for your startup success? I'd like to know everyone's thought on this. Every incubator present here, if possible, please. That would help all of us, I hope.
I think if everyone put their video on, they would have answered.
Yes.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. But I think to what you said, Shiraj, it's all about we all have multiple success metrics and we have to keep redefining these success metrics, right? So one moment is...
Hi, this is Gautam. Sorry to interrupt.
Go for it.
This is Gautam from Periyar University Incubation, Salem. Suraj, I would agree your point because we are operating in a rural kind of setup. So in terms of metric, as you said, the first order which our startup gets a successful obviously we will consider that as a metric. Yes,
I'm glad to know that. Thanks for that. It really helped.
I think we are past 10 minutes the given time. Any final comments, Aarthi, Vikyath, and Pranay?
I think we have said it all. I mean, feel free to reach out to any of us in case you want very specific information. Otherwise, whatever it is, we've managed to put it in this presentation and share it here.
Sure. Thank you so much, Aarthi, Vikyath, and Pranay. Over to you, Nirupama.
Thanks, Sai.